Squad. Now let's get into the weakest military troops that put their country to shame. Iraq. Iraq used to be the fourth biggest army in the world under Saddam Hussein, but it's now little more than a shadow of its former self. The Iraqi army was given around $26 billion of investments and years of training from American and British forces, but that wasn't enough to keep them up there with even the average armies of the world. One of the biggest problems in the Iraqi army was the huge number of ghost soldiers, those who were receiving pay but weren't showing up to work. North Korea. The North Korean army might not seem like a threat to too many people because it's unlikely we'll ever face their land forces in person. And while we might already consider North Korea to be an embarrassment to the rest of the world, their military is even more of a laughingstock from the outside. Conscription to the army is a compulsory part of life in North Korea, so residents don't have a choice but to sign up. The horrendous conditions that they're put through, ranging from starvation to corruption and abuse, means that the rest of the world looks on sympathetically. Eritrea. Eritrea is widely considered to be the worst place in the world to join the army. It's another country to force its inhabitants to sign up, but there's no term of service, making it open-ended. In 2015, the United Nations Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in Eritrea released a 500-page report detailing the systematic, widespread, and gross human rights violations that spurred thousands of people to flee the totalitarian East African country to get out of the army once and for all. And what makes matters worse is that the people forced into the army aren't even properly paid. They only receive a tiny amount of pocket money. Nigeria. It was only 2014 when Nigerian army troops launched an unsuccessful attempt to assassinate one of their country's most prominent generals. And although the plot didn't work, it did shine a light on the failings of the military. At the time, the country was struggling with the recent abduction of 200 schoolgirls by the militant group Boko Haram. The attempted assassination was so badly done that the army was forced to deny it had attempted an attack in the first place. The only thing it really achieved was highlighting the low morale and poor capabilities of the 60,000-strong army. Costa Rica. Costa Rica would struggle if anyone wanted to attack it because it barely has an army. In fact, its army is so small that many people don't even think it exists nowadays, and many peace activists have praised the country for its absence of a military, which was formally removed in 1948. But Costa Rica still has official fighters, even if they don't fall under the term of an army. It has 70 soldiers who are trained to intercept narcotics traffickers, rescue hostages, and act as a high-intensity counter-terrorist unit. However, Costa Rica is still focusing training on potential future conflict. The Philippines. The Philippines was called the sixth worst army in the world back in 2015 thanks to its inability to upgrade their training and equipment. Their problem started when Chinese military forces started moving forward and claiming land belonging to the Philippines. But despite this, Army spokesman Colonel Benjamin Howe said that they were working to become a world-class army by 2028. At the same time, the country is starting to build up its supply of equipment and to modernize existing pieces. That's all well and good, as long as no one decides to attack them in the next decade. Tajikistan. Tajikistan rarely makes international news, and that's partially because it's such a small and unassuming country. However, its borders are with Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, China, and Afghanistan, which is where its problems begin. It's not a dangerous country itself, but its highly political neighbors means the country has to be constantly on high alert for danger. And it would really be a problem if trouble did decide to come to Tajikistan because the army is incredibly underdeveloped. There are reportedly 16,000 soldiers involved in guarding one of these borders, but their weaponry and military equipment leaves a lot to be desired. Mongolia. The Mongolian army used to be far stronger than it is now. At its peak, the empire of the Mongols stretched from Eastern Europe to Eastern Siberia and the Korean Peninsula, and its army was representative of its size. This was back during the 13th century, and unfortunately, the country's military has gone downhill over the years. And its neighbors, Russia and China, keep getting stronger and stronger, which isn't a good sign. Mongolia's army definitely needs to step it up in case a war ever breaks out between those two. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has the opposite problem when it comes to rounding up troops. Its army is actually too big. And while this might never seem like a bad thing, it's caused huge organizational issues, and no one is really sure how to tackle them. Because other than simply kicking people out, how do you reduce the size of an army? The Saudi Arabian army's main goal is to push back Iranian forces, but they're limited by their military, despite the fact that the kingdom is one of the world's largest spenders on defense. As it stands, people are far more scared of the Iranian army than they are of Saudi Arabia's. Central African Republic. What do you do when you need more soldiers, but all of the adults in the country are already fighting or otherwise engaged? Start picking out children to fight instead. And that's exactly why there's so much shame on the Central African Republic's army, because they're using underage fighters to supposedly protect the country. As many as 10,000 children were used by armed groups in the conflict in the Central African Republic between 2012 and 2015, and many still remain there now. These children, some of whom are as young as 8 years old, are taught to fight in the military, despite the government's best efforts to stop people under the age of 15 from joining. That's all for the weakest military troops that put their country to shame. We hope you found this video informative, and don't forget to leave us a comment down below and let us know what you think. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.